All right, guys, so today I wanted to discuss whatever happened to the Titanic private Promenade decks located in the parlor suites. There were two on the Titanic. They were in the movie. It's one of my favorite rooms on the ship. But I do want to mention the Titanic is trending on Twitter. I got very excited. I thought they were raising it now, but yeah, it's trending. Apparently, a U-boat got lost. They can't find it. Some tourists were trying to visit the wreck, and it is unaccounted for right now in the Atlantic Ocean. So that's why the Titanic is trending. Maybe a little bit of a false alarm. I thought they had found something. I mean, if you're going to trend on Twitter, shouldn't it be something about the Titanic, the ship? Not about a little submarine that gets lost. I don't know. But when it comes to the two private Promenade decks, very, very rare. This was the one thing on Titanic that screamed of luxury. $50,000, the cost of these two rooms. There was a total of 4 parlor suites on the ship. If you guys saw, the room that Cal and Rose stayed at, that was one of the private Promenade exclusive rooms that was just aft of the grand staircase. The location of it really is interesting because they don't do a good job of showing the private Promenade deck in the movies, but if you go right outside of the private Promenade deck, you will go to like a landing area where first class passengers were loaded on, and then right to the left of that is the grand staircase. So kind of an interesting location, but the private Promenade deck is just so interesting to me because, we think nowadays every cruise ship has a balcony where you can go outside and look at the water and things, but back then it was luxury to have like an exclusive sunroom with just windows. It's just so interesting to me. And the parlor suites were located on B and C deck, with the deluxe suites being exclusively on B deck. Now, the size of the private deck was 50 feet long. The deck connected to the first class gangway entrances immediately forward. That's what I was talking about in reference to where it is. The two private decks were unique to the Titanic, decorated in half timber style paneling with deck chairs, sofas, tables, and some potted plants as well. In the movie, it likely flooded towards the end, so I guess it is understandable, but I would have liked to have seen a few still shots of it going underwater. You can take a look at its overall design, and then you can also look at the sitting room. So one of the interesting things about the sitting room, in the movie, they make the sitting room a lot bigger than it actually was in real life. Of course, it is one of the most expensive suites, so it has multiple bedrooms and things of that nature. This is a good view of kind of the setup. So you're looking at B deck. You've got the grand staircase legitimately right above the sitting room. You can see right under it is a hallway to the main suites. You go into it, you have the sitting room, and then you do have the private deck located right next to the water with all those windows that can be pulled up and pulled down. That is another view of how long the private deck actually was. And there are just some more nice images of it. It's just crazy that this was luxury back then, and it really was. This unique to the Titanic only. Absolutely beautiful. This was the suite to own. And when it comes to the sinking, what happened to it, you can see this is really the only image I could find, of an artist's rendering of what the sinking might look like. It likely took on water towards the end of the sinking, minutes before the ship broke up, and I'm sure there was a list, so the water was probably tilted towards one side. And then this is an image, so I do not think this, unfortunately, is the private deck. I'm guessing this is just part of the public area for the first class passengers, not the private Promenade deck, just the regular Promenade deck that was on the interior. So this is one of the differences between Titanic and Olympic, and this is why Titanic had a Promenade deck that was enclosed with windows. The Olympic did not have it. So I believe that's what this is. One day, probably back in 6th or 7th grade, I was sick and I came across a video of a Titanic exploration. Maybe this exploration happened in the early 2000s, I'm not sure. But they did explore the private deck because I remember vividly seeing it. It's a core memory of mine. And I went back and I looked at the Titanic encyclopedia and the video's been deleted. And based on where the private deck is located versus where the ship split up, the room should be fine. That is an outside shot looking in. So what you're looking at, the smaller windows are B deck. The Promenade deck above it is a public space for first class. That's A deck. So B deck is what we're going for. And those little windows is where the private deck was located. I believe that is A deck right there. That is a very nice HD photo of it. But you can see on the one side, you go outside, that leads straight into the grand staircase. Also, there's a gangway where first class passengers get loaded onto the ship as well. And then this is a really, really good image of the private decks and how big they were on each side right there. So the overall suite contained the sitting room, you've got a bedroom, you have your private bathroom, and then you've got another bedroom. It was a large suite for sure, located on each side of the ship, with 4 total exclusive parlor suites, but only 2 that housed the private deck. That cost right around $50,000. And those are real photos of the private deck on the Titanic. They took photos of them because it was an exclusive to the Titanic and they wanted to show it off. So yes, one of my favorite rooms on the entire ship, just because the uniqueness of it, you know, it's your own private space, but it's not like a balcony, you know, it's not like anything crazy, but it is pretty impressive, especially back then. It was the luxurious thing to have, and the area is still accessible, and I hope they do tour it and actually go inside the Titanic. This would be one of the spots I would want them to go to, along with the swimming pool possibly, and maybe the squash court as well. But this would be one of my top areas. I'm sure, again, the wood paneling is probably destroyed and things like that, but it was a pretty cool area. On B deck, cabins 52, 54, and 56. In the movie, they referenced it, but in the movie, based on its location, when you saw Jack and Rose leaving and entering the room, and, you know, Lovejoy and Cal, the location of it was completely wrong in the movie, and a lot of people referenced that, but that's just part of the movie. It is what it is. They're gonna kind of, you know, twist a few different things, because it was located in real life literally right next to the grand staircase. You can watch in a scene Rose and Jack walk about 30 or 40 yards, you know, past like 6 or 7 first-class cabins, when in reality it was right next to it. So it was not in the correct spot. But again, it's a movie. It's not going to be 100% accurate. I really don't care. Just a technicality. Either way, that is the private Promenade deck. We'll see if they do explore it and get some better images of the suite, the parlor suites areas with the private deck. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.